I was on my knees scrubbing the floor in the tattered clothes my stepmother forced on me while she shouted insults from the stairs. Just as I looked down to hide my tears, a black SUV arrived. My grandfather, the man my family claimed had disowned me, stepped out. He looked at my rags, glared at her, and spoke words that froze the whole house. My name is Michelle McGee. I am 29 years old, and I possess a master's degree in business administration. Yet at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, I was on my hands and knees, scrubbing a persistent stain out of a Persian rug that cost more than my first car. The water in the gray plastic bucket next to me was turning a murky brown, smelling of lemon chemicals and old dirt. My hands were raw. The skin around my fingernails cracked from the dry winter air of Cleveland, Ohio, and the harsh detergents I had been using since 6 in the morning. I was not wearing the business casual attire I used to wear when I worked at Skyline Shield Security. Instead, I was dressed in what could only be described as a costume of poverty. It was an oversized, moth-eaten gray sweater that smelled of mildew, paired with sweatpants that had a tear running up the left calf. This was not my choice. This was the uniform my stepmother, Cynthia Lowell, had insisted upon. She claimed that if I was going to live under her roof without paying rent, a lie she told everyone, including herself, I needed to earn my keep, and I certainly did not need to ruin good clothes while doing manual labor. The house was a sprawling, modern mansion in the wealthy suburbs, a place that reeked of new money and pretension. It was silent except for the rhythmic scrubbing of my brush against the wool fibers and the distant, cheerful hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Suddenly, a wet, heavy weight slammed into my shoulder. I gasped, the cold shock of it making me flinch. A wet cleaning rag slid down my arm and landed with a plop on the floor next to my knee. I looked up, my neck craning toward the top of the grand staircase. Cynthia stood there, gripping the polished oak banister with a manicured hand. She looked immaculate in a cream-colored cashmere cardigan and tailored trousers, her blonde hair coiffed to perfection. She looked like the queen of the castle, staring down at the peasant in the scullery. "You missed a spot," she said, her voice dripping with a casual cruelty that she had perfected over the last 15 years. "Right there, near the fringe. If the Parker family sees a stain when they arrive for brunch, I will tell them exactly whose laziness is responsible." I picked up the wet rag she had thrown at me. It was cold and slimy. I wanted to throw it back. I wanted to stand up, march up those stairs, and tell her exactly what I knew about the bank accounts and the forged signatures. But I swallowed the rage. It tasted bitter, like bile. "I am cleaning it now. Cynthia," I said, keeping my voice flat. "That is mother to you," she snapped. "And do not look at me with that sullen expression. You should be grateful. Any other parent would have kicked you out onto the street after you lost your job. We took you in. We are feeding you." I lowered my head, focusing on the intricate floral pattern of the rug. Feeding me? I was eating leftovers while she ordered catering for her social club. But I needed to stay. I needed to be here, inside the house, because the documents I needed, the proof regarding the townhouse my grandmother had left me, were hidden somewhere in Daniel Lowell's home office. I was not a servant. I was a spy behind enemy lines, wearing the disguise of a defeated daughter. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement in the kitchen. The open concept design of the first floor meant there were no walls to hide the cowardice of my father. Daniel. He was standing by the massive granite island, his back to me. He was wearing his weekend polo shirt, clutching a ceramic mug of coffee as if it were a life preserver. He had heard the wet rag hit me. He had heard Cynthia's voice echoing off the high ceilings. He knew exactly what was happening. "Dad?" I called out, softly. I just wanted him to acknowledge me, just once. He did not turn around. He reached out and adjusted the settings on the espresso machine, creating a loud whirring noise of grinding beans that conveniently drowned out the atmosphere of abuse in the living room. He took a sip of his coffee, staring out the window at the gray Ohio sky, pretending that his wife was not treating his biological daughter like an indentured servant. My heart hardened a little more. That was the last shred of hope dissolving. Daniel Lowell was no longer my protector. He was just another obstacle. "Don't bother your father," Cynthia called down. Descending one step, "He is stressed enough with the business. He does not need your drama." I dipped the brush back into the bucket. "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Now hurry up. Brooke is trying to film her content in the sunroom, and she says your bucket is ruining the aesthetic of the background." I shifted my position, wringing out the sponge. Through the French doors of the sunroom, I could see my stepsister, Brooke. She was 22, glowing with the benefits of dermatological treatments and a stress-free existence. She had a ring light set up on a tripod and was dancing in front of her phone, doing one of those trending challenges. She was wearing a designer silk robe, holding a glass of orange juice acting as a mimosa. She looked radiant, happy, and completely oblivious to the reality of the world. As I moved my bucket, Brooke stopped dancing and marched over to the glass doors. She slid one open, letting the smell of expensive perfume waft out to mix with my lemon cleaner. "Michelle, seriously?" Brooke groaned, looking at her phone screen. "You are literally in the frame. I am trying to do a day in the life of a rich girl parody, but you looking like a homeless person in the background is making it too real. Can you scooch to the left? Like, way to the left?" "I am cleaning the floor, Brooke," I said, scrubbing harder. "Well, clean it quietly," she huffed. "And tuck your hair back. You look like a witch." She slammed the door shut and went back to smiling at her camera, her face transforming instantly into a mask of bubbly charm. "Hey guys! So today we are prepping for a huge family brunch. My mom is literally the best hostess ever." I watched her for a second. The lies came so easily to them. They curated their reality, filtered it, and posted it for the world to envy, while the truth was kneeling on the floor in dirty sweatpants. I focused on the rhythm of the work. Scrub, rinse, wring, repeat. I had to keep my mind sharp. Last night, while they were sleeping, I had managed to locate a file in the study labeled Tax Returns 2023. Inside, I had found a receipt for property tax on the townhouse, the one my grandmother, Margaret Reeves, had left to me in her will. Cynthia had told me the house was sold years ago to pay for my college tuition. But if it was sold, why was Daniel Lowell still paying property taxes on it this year? I was close. I just needed one more night to find the deed. Until then, I would be the maid. I would be the scapegoat. I would be whatever they needed me to be, so they would lower their guard. "Michelle!" Cynthia's voice was closer now. She had come down the stairs. "Look at this dust on the baseboards. Honestly, do you have no pride? This is the house you grew up in. Show some respect." I looked up at her. She was looming over me, her eyes cold and hard like marbles. "I am doing my best, Cynthia." "Your best is pathetic," she spat. "No wonder you were let go from that firm. You have no drive. You just expect things to be handed to you because of your grandfather's name. Well, Leonard Reeves isn't here to save you, is he?" The mention of my grandfather stung. Leonard Reeves, the tycoon, the man who built the Reeves Market Group empire from a single grocery store. I hadn't spoken to him in 3 years. Cynthia had made sure of that, intercepting calls, telling me he was disappointed in me, telling him I was too busy partying to care about the family. They had successfully severed the bond between us, leaving me isolated. "Keep his name out of this," I whispered. "What did you say?" Cynthia stepped closer, her expensive shoe inches from my hand. "I said, I will clean the baseboards," I replied, forcing my voice to remain steady. Just then, the heavy chime of the front doorbell echoed through the house. It was a deep, resonant sound that signaled the arrival of guests. Cynthia's head snapped toward the door. She checked her diamond wristwatch. "That cannot be the Parkers. They are not due for another 45 minutes. The bell rang again, more insistent this time. "Daniel!" Cynthia shouted toward the kitchen. "Get the door." "I am busy," my father yelled back. The sound of the coffee grinder starting up again. He was hiding. He was terrified of whoever might be at the door. Or perhaps he just didn't want to be involved. Cynthia let out a huff of frustration. She looked at me, kneeling in my rags, her eyes narrowing with a sudden, malicious idea. "You get it," she ordered. I froze. "Cynthia, look at me. I am filthy. I cannot answer the front door." "You will do as you are told," she screamed, her voice losing its composed veneer. "You are the help today, aren't you? So go help. Open the door. Let whoever it is see you. Let them see exactly what you have become. That outfit fits your position in this family perfectly." She wanted to shame me. She wanted a delivery driver or a neighbor to see Michelle McGee, the granddaughter of Leonard Reeves, looking like a beggar. She wanted to break my spirit completely. I stood up slowly. My knees cracked. I wiped my soapy hands on my sweatpants, leaving wet streaks on the gray fabric. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, but I did not argue. Arguments only extended the torture. I walked across the foyer, the marble cold under my bare feet. The house was silent now, except for Brooke's muffled giggling from the sunroom. Cynthia stood with her arms crossed, a smirk playing on her lips, waiting for my humiliation. I reached the massive oak door. My hand trembled slightly as I gripped the brass handle. I took a deep breath, preparing myself to face a courier or a lost neighbor. I pulled the heavy door open. The cold November wind rushed in, biting at my exposed skin, but I didn't feel the cold. I felt the shock. Standing on the porch was not a delivery man. It was a figure of immense authority. He was wearing a long charcoal wool coat that looked like it cost more than Cynthia's entire wardrobe. He leaned slightly on a cane with a silver handle shaped like a lion's head. His hair was silver white, swept back impeccably. It was Leonard Reeves, my grandfather. He looked older than the last time I had seen him, but his eyes were the same, sharp, blue, and terrifyingly intelligent. Behind him, a black SUV idled in the driveway, its engine purring softly. A driver in a suit stood by the car door, waiting. I stood there, frozen. I was paralyzed. I knew what I looked like. My hair was a mess. My sweater was full of holes, and my pants were stained with dirty water. I smelled like bleach and sweat. Grandfather did not speak immediately. He looked at me. His eyes traveled from my messy hair down to my raw, red hands, and then to the wet patches on my knees. There was no pity in his eyes, only a dawn of terrible realization. He looked past me, into the foyer. He saw the bucket of dirty water. He saw Cynthia standing at the foot of the stairs, her smirk vanishing instantly, replaced by a look of absolute horror, her face drained of color, turning a pasty white. Grandfather looked back at me. He saw the bruise on my shoulder where the wet rag had hit me earlier. He saw the defeat in my posture. He took a step forward, crossing the threshold. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He didn't shout. He didn't rage. He simply stood there, radiating a power that made the large house feel suddenly very small. He looked at Cynthia, who was trembling now, unable to speak. Then he looked back at me, his granddaughter, the heiress to his legacy, dressed in rags. "Ah," he said, his voice low, gravelly, and dangerous. "I arrived just in time to see the truth here." The sight of my grandfather standing in that doorway, the cold wind whipping his silver hair, did not just freeze the room, it shattered time. In that single, breathless second, the present reality of dirty floor water and humiliation dissolved, and I was pulled violently back into the past. I was pulled back to the days before the rags, before the debt, and before the silence that had grown like a cancer between Leonard Reeves and me. To understand how a girl with a master's degree ends up scrubbing floors for a woman who hates her, you have to understand the slow, insidious erosion of a life. It does not happen all at once. It happens by degrees, like a temperature dropping 1 digit at a time until you do not realize you are freezing to death until your heart stops beating. My life began with warmth. I grew up in a house filled with the smell of my mother's baking and the sound of my father's laughter. Back then, Daniel Lowell was not the cowering man hiding behind an espresso machine. He was vibrant. He was an architect with a vision, and he adored my mother. But the true pillar of my world, the sun around which we all orbited, was my grandfather, Leonard Reeves. I was his only grandchild. While other kids were going to theme parks, Grandpa Leonard would take me to the headquarters of Reeves Market Group. I remember walking through the massive distribution centers, holding his hand. He would stop and talk to everyone, from the forklift drivers to the floor managers. He taught me that business was not about money, it was about people. "Michelle," he would say to me, pointing at the rows of fresh produce, "you see these apples? We do not just sell apples. We sell dinner for a family. We sell a snack for a child after school. Never forget the human being on the other side of the transaction." I worshipped him. I wanted to be him. Then, when I was 16, my mother died. It was ovarian cancer, and it was fast. It hollowed my father out. He became a shell, a ghost walking through the rooms of our home. He lost his spark, his drive, and his ability to make decisions. Enter Cynthia. She appeared 2 years later. She was a paralegal at the firm my father used for his estate planning. She was beautiful, organized, and terrifyingly efficient, to a grieving man drowning in paperwork and loneliness. She must have looked like a life raft. To me, she looked like hope. I wanted my dad to be happy again. I wanted the house to feel like a home again. Cynthia was a master of performance art. When we went to Sunday dinner at Grandpa Leonard's estate, she was the picture of the devoted stepmother. She would fuss over my collar, brag about my grades, and listen raptly to Grandpa's stories about the changing market trends. "Oh, Leonard," she would coo, pouring him tea. "You are simply brilliant. Michelle is so lucky to have you as a mentor. I keep telling Daniel that we need to encourage her to follow in your footsteps." Grandpa, usually so sharp, was charmed. He saw a woman who was putting his broken family back together. He saw a woman who loved his son and his granddaughter. He did not see the shark swimming beneath the surface. The change began shortly after the wedding. It was subtle at first. It started with the protection of my time. I was 18, getting ready for college. I used to call Grandpa every Sunday. Then, suddenly, Cynthia would be on the phone when I picked it up. "Oh, honey, he just called," she would say, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "He said he is swamped with the merger. He asked me to tell you he loves you, but he cannot talk this week." Or I would try to visit, and Cynthia would intercept me at the door. "Michelle, your grandfather is feeling under the weather. He explicitly said he wants no visitors. Let the poor man rest." I believed her. Why would I not? She was my father's wife. Then came the manufactured conflicts. I would receive expensive gifts from Grandpa that were not my style, gaudy jewelry or clothes that did not fit. I would write thank you notes, but I found out later Cynthia never mailed them. Instead, she would tell Grandpa. Michelle said she would have preferred cash. I told her that was rude. "Leonard, but you know how teenagers are these days." Slowly, the narrative shifted. In Grandpa's eyes, I was becoming distant and ungrateful. In my eyes, Grandpa was becoming cold and unavailable. The Sunday dinners stopped. The phone calls dwindled to nothing. I thought he had moved on, that he was disappointed in me for reasons I could not understand. I thought he had replaced me with his business. By the time I was 22, the wall between us was solid. I stopped trying to reach out because the rejection, or what I thought was rejection, hurt too much. That was when the financial control began. My father, still lost in his grief, and now completely dependent on Cynthia's strength, slowly handed over the reins of the household. He stopped looking at bank statements. He stopped asking about investments. "Cynthia is so good with numbers," he would say, staring blankly at the television. "I just want peace, Michelle." Cynthia took over everything. She consolidated accounts. She changed passwords. She moved us from our modest family home to the sprawling, expensive mansion in the suburbs because it suited Daniel's status, even though I knew his architecture firm was struggling. Then came the summer I graduated college. I had landed a prestigious internship at Skyline Shield Security, a top-tier firm in corporate risk management. It was a huge opportunity. I was going to be working 60 hours a week, analyzing data, proving myself. I was determined to make it on my own, to show Grandpa, from a distance, that I was worthy of the name Reeves. I remember the morning perfectly. It was a humid Tuesday in July. I was rushing to eat breakfast, nervous about my first day. Cynthia was sitting at the kitchen island, a stack of papers in front of her. She looked concerned, motherly. "Michelle, sweetheart," she said, putting a hand on my arm. "Your father and I were talking. You are going to be so busy with this internship. It is going to be intense." "I know," I said, shoveling oatmeal into my mouth. "But I can handle it." "Of course you can," she smiled. "But we want to support you. You have student loans kicking in, and you have your car insurance, and all those utility bills for your apartment. It is a lot of administrative work." She slid a document across the marble counter. It was thick, printed on heavy bond paper. "What is this?" I asked. "It is just a standard power of attorney," she said casually, as if she were offering me a second cup of coffee. "It just authorizes me to handle your paperwork for you while you focus on your career. I can talk to the student loan people, manage your car payments, and deal with the insurance companies. You will not have to spend your lunch breaks on hold with customer service. I will be your personal assistant." I hesitated. I picked up the pen. "Is this normal?" "All families with wealth do this, Michelle," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "Your father signed one for me years ago. It just lets me take care of the boring stuff so you can shine at Skyline. Do you really want to worry about a missed electric bill when you are trying to impress the VP of security?" I looked at my father. He was in the living room, reading the paper. "Dad," I called out, "is this okay?" He didn't even look up. "Listen to your mother. Michelle, she knows best." She wasn't my mother, but at that moment, she was the only capable adult in the room. I was 22. I was naive. I thought power of attorney meant she could write checks for my water bill. I did not understand the breadth of what that document allowed. I did not understand that I was handing her the keys to my legal identity. "Okay," I said. "Thanks, Cynthia. That is really helpful." I signed my name at the bottom of the page, Michelle McGee. The ink was blue. I remember that detail vividly. Cynthia watched me sign, and for a split second, the mask slipped. A small, tight smile touched the corners of her lips. It was not a smile of affection. It was the smile of a predator who had just heard the trap snap shut. "Perfect," she said, sliding the paper away and tucking it into a folder. "Now, go be brilliant. I will take care of everything else." And she did. She took care of everything. She used that document to intercept my mail. She used it to access the trust fund my mother had left me, small, but significant, and drained it under the guise of reinvestment. She used it to open credit cards in my name, racking up debt to fund Brooke's wardrobe and her own social climbing. I worked my heart out at Skyline Shield. I was promoted. I was making good money, but I never saw it. Cynthia insisted that I deposit my checks into a family-managed account for tax benefits, giving me a small allowance to live on. "We are building your portfolio," she lied. "By the time you are 30, you will be set for life." I trusted her. I trusted my father. And because I was working 14 hours a day, I never checked. I never looked. I let the fox guard the henhouse because I was too busy trying to prove I was a wolf. 2 years ago, when the economy dipped and Skyline Shield had to do a massive round of layoffs, I lost my job. I thought I had a safety net. I thought I had savings. I went to Cynthia. "I need access to my accounts," I said. "I need to pay rent while I look for a new position." That was the day the trap was revealed, though I still didn't see the full extent of it. "Oh, Michelle," she said, shaking her head sadly. "The market has been terrible. Your investments, they crashed. All of it. Gone." "What?" I felt the room spin. "Everything?" "Everything," she said. "And with your credit card debt." "I don't have credit card debt," I protested. "The cards we opened to build your credit score," she explained patiently. "The interest rates skyrocketed. You are actually in the red. Sweetie, you cannot afford your apartment anymore." I was devastated. I was broke, unemployed, and apparently in debt. I had nowhere to go. "But do not worry," Cynthia said, opening her arms. "We are family. You will move back in with us. We will help you get back on your feet." It sounded like charity. It was actually a prison sentence. I moved into the guest room. Within a week, the guest room became the storage room, and I was moved to a smaller room in the attic. Within a month, Cynthia fired the cleaning lady. "To save money," she said, "since you are here and you are not contributing financially, perhaps you could help out around the house." It started with doing the dishes, then the laundry, then the heavy scrubbing. Step by step, she stripped away my dignity. She took my phone to cut down on the bill. She restricted my internet access. She isolated me completely. I became the maid. I became the punching bag for her frustrations. And because I believed I was broke and indebted to them, I took it. I scrubbed the floors. I cleaned the toilets. I wore the old clothes she gave me because I couldn't afford new ones. But there was one thing she forgot. She forgot that I was Leonard Reeves's granddaughter. She forgot that I had spent 3 years at Skyline Shield Security analyzing fraud patterns. 6 months ago, while cleaning Daniel's home office, I found a letter that had fallen behind the filing cabinet. It was from the county tax assessor. It was addressed to me, Michelle McGee, regarding a property at 412 Elm Street, my grandmother's townhouse. Cynthia had told me it was sold years ago, but the letter said taxes were overdue. That was the crack in the facade. That was the moment I woke up. I realized she hadn't just mismanaged my money. She had stolen my life. I realized the debt was fabricated. The market crash was a lie. And the isolation from Grandpa was a strategic blockade. I started digging. I played the part of the beaten-down servant by day. But by night, I was an investigator. I found the power of attorney document in her safe. I saw the date. It was the one I signed at the kitchen table. It was supposed to be temporary. It had no expiration date. I realized then that my father wasn't just passive. He was negligent to the point of complicity. He had let this happen. So, I stayed on my knees. I kept scrubbing. I kept wearing the rags. I let her beat me down because I needed to be inside the house to get the evidence. I needed the original deed to the townhouse, and I needed the bank records she kept in the wall safe behind the painting in the study. I was biding my time, waiting for the right moment to strike. I just never expected that the moment would come in the form of a doorbell ringing on a Tuesday morning, bringing the one man Cynthia feared most to our doorstep. I looked at Grandpa Leonard now, standing in the foyer of this house of lies. I saw him looking at the woman who had orchestrated my downfall, and I saw the recognition in his eyes. He didn't just see a dirty floor. He saw the timeline. He saw the last 10 years of silence. And for the first time in a decade, I didn't feel alone. I felt like the girl who used to walk the grocery store aisles with the king of the market, and the king had just returned to claim his own. The descent from being a rising star at Skyline Shield Security to becoming a glorified servant in my father's house did not happen in a single, dramatic explosion. It was a slow, suffocating slide, greased by my own desperation and Cynthia's calculated manipulation. It began on a rainy Tuesday in November. I remember the date perfectly because it was the day the illusion of my independence finally shattered. The layoffs at Skyline were swift and brutal. I was called into a glass-walled conference room, handed a severance package that amounted to 2 weeks of pay, and told that my position was being eliminated due to corporate restructuring. I walked out of the building with a cardboard box containing a stapler, a photo of my mother, and a coffee mug, stepping into the gray sleet that coated downtown Cleveland. I had $300 in my checking account. My rent was due in 4 days. My lease was up for renewal, and my landlord had already informed me that the rent was increasing by 15%. I did the math in my car, staring at the rain streaking down the windshield. I could not afford to stay. I had no savings because, as I now knew, Cynthia had drained them under the guise of investment management. I had no choice. I had to go back to the mansion. When I arrived, soaking wet and humiliated, Cynthia was waiting in the foyer. She did not look surprised. She looked like a chess player who had just watched her opponent walk right into a trap she had set 10 moves ago. "Oh, Michelle," she said, her voice dripping with a saccharine pity that made my skin crawl. "We heard the news. Poor thing. The economy is just terrible right now. But do not worry. This is your home. You will always have a place here." She hugged me. It felt like being embraced by a constrictor snake. My father stood behind her, looking at his shoes, muttering something about how it was good to have me back and how I could take some time to figure things out. The first week was deceptively normal. I was a guest. I applied for jobs. I updated my resume, and I tried to stay out of the way. But by the second week, the dynamic shifted. It started with small requests. "Michelle, since you are home all day, would you mind starting dinner? The housekeeper is out sick." "Michelle, could you just run the vacuum over the living room? The Parkers are coming over and I am swamped." "Michelle, Brooke needs a ride to the mall. Her car is in the shop." I said yes. I said yes to everything because I felt guilty. I felt like a failure who was leeching off her family. I wanted to earn my keep. I wanted to show them I was grateful. By the third week, the requests became demands. By the fourth week, they became my schedule. I was no longer asking if I should cook dinner. I was being handed a menu at 8 in the morning and told to have it ready by 7 in the evening. The housekeeper was not sick. She had been fired. I was the replacement. One particularly humiliating afternoon, Cynthia came into the kitchen where I was peeling 5 pounds of potatoes. She was holding her car keys and wearing her tennis whites. "Michelle," she said, checking her reflection in the microwave door, "Brooke has a photo shoot for her social media content today downtown. She needs a driver and someone to hold the lighting equipment. You need to take her." "Cynthia, I have an interview via Zoom at 2 o'clock, I said, wiping my hands on a towel. She turned to me, her eyes narrowing. "An interview? For what? Another desk job that will fire you in 6 months? Family comes first. Michelle, Brooke is building a brand. That is a real career in this economy. Cancel the interview. You can drive her, or you can find somewhere else to sleep tonight." I canceled the interview. I drove Brooke downtown in her white convertible. She sat in the passenger seat, taking selfies and complaining about the wind messing up her hair, while I navigated traffic. When we got to the location, a trendy alleyway with graffiti art, she treated me like a hired hand. "Hold the reflector higher, Michelle," she snapped, posing with a handbag she had bought with money that probably should have been mine. "No, not like that. You are casting a shadow. God, do you not know anything about lighting?" I stood there for 3 hours, my arms aching, holding a silver reflector while passers-by looked at me. I was wearing jeans and a tattered coat, fading into the background, while Brooke shone like a diamond. I was the invisible support system, the ugliness required to make her beauty possible. It was during this period of servitude that I stumbled upon the first piece of the puzzle that would eventually bring Leonard Reeves to our door. Cynthia had ordered me to reorganize the filing cabinets in the home office. "It is a mess in there," she had said. "Sort everything by date and category, and do not snoop." I was on the floor, surrounded by stacks of paper, sorting through years of utility bills and tax documents. My father sat at his desk, staring blankly at a computer screen, pretending to work. The silence between us was heavy, filled with the things we were not saying. I picked up a file labeled Property Assets. I assumed it would contain the deed to the mansion. Instead, I found a thick document from a lending institution I did not recognize. It was a mortgage agreement. I flipped it open. My eyes scanned the address property description. 412 Elm Street. My heart stopped. That was the address of the townhouse my grandmother, Margaret Reeves, had left to me. It was a beautiful, historic brownstone in the city. When I was 18, Cynthia had told me it was being rented out to cover the taxes and maintenance, and that the profits were going into my trust. I looked at the date on the document. It was dated 6 months ago. It was a second mortgage, a home equity line of credit taken out against the townhouse. The amount was staggering, $200,000. I felt a cold flush of anger rise up my neck. I looked at the signature line, It was signed by Daniel Lowell, acting as guardian and trustee. "Dad?" I asked, my voice trembling. He jumped, spilling a little coffee on his desk. What is it, Michelle?" I held up the document. "What is this? Why is there a $200,000 loan against Grandma's townhouse? You told me that house was paid off. You told me it was sitting there, waiting for me." Daniel's face went pale. He looked at the door, checking to see if Cynthia was nearby. "Michelle, put that away. You do not understand these things. I have a master's degree in business, Dad," I said, standing up. "I understand what a mortgage is. Where is this money? Did you spend it?" Before he could answer, the door swung open. Cynthia walked in. She must have been listening outside. She saw the paper in my hand and her face hardened into a mask of cold fury. "I told you to organize, not to interrogate," she said, snatching the document from my hand. "Why is there a loan on my house, Cynthia?" I demanded. She laughed, a sharp, barking sound. "Your house? That house belongs to the family trust, Michelle, and we had to leverage it. For the family. Your father's business has been struggling. We needed liquidity. We did it to keep this roof over your head, to feed you." "Grandma left that house to me specifically," I argued, my voice rising. "It was not supposed to be touched. And $200,000? Where did that go? Did it go to the business, or did it go to Brooke's new car and your club memberships?" "You ungrateful little brat," Cynthia hissed, stepping into my personal space. "We made a financial decision to save this family. You should be thanking us. Instead, you stand here judging us while wearing clothes we bought you, eating food we paid for." I looked at my father. "Dad, tell her. Tell her that house was off limits." Daniel looked at me, then looked at Cynthia. I saw the fear in his eyes. He was terrified of her. He was terrified of losing the lifestyle she managed for him. "Michelle," he said, his voice weak and pleading, "please, just do not argue with your mother. She knows what is best for the finances. It is complicated." "It is not complicated," I shouted. "It is theft." "That is enough," Cynthia screamed. "Get out. Get out of this office. Go clean the kitchen. If I hear one more word about this, you can pack your bags and sleep under a bridge." I stood there, shaking. I looked at the man who had raised me, the man who used to carry me on his shoulders. He couldn't even meet my gaze. He turned back to his computer screen, shrinking into his chair. I walked out. I didn't pack my bags. I couldn't. I had nowhere to go. And that was exactly what they counted on. But that night, the seed of rebellion had been planted. I did not stop cleaning. In fact, I cleaned harder. I volunteered to clean the parts of the house they usually ignored. I became invisible. I became the furniture. 2 days later, I was cleaning out the bottom drawer of the hallway console table, a place where junk mail usually accumulated. Cynthia rarely looked there. I found an envelope that had been opened and shoved to the back. It was from a bank called Lakeside Community Bank. I did not have an account at Lakeside Community Bank. I pulled the letter out. It was a notice of overdue payment for a personal loan. I looked at the name on the account, Michelle McGee. I looked at the address. It was the address of the mansion. My hands started to tremble. I had never taken out a loan at Lakeside. I sat down on the floor, right there in the hallway, and read the document. It was a high-interest personal loan for $15,000, taken out 4 months ago. I turned the page. There was a copy of the loan application attached. And there it was, my signature. Michelle McGee. I stared at it. It looked like my signature. It had the same loop on the M, the same slant on the double E. To a stranger, it would look authentic, but I knew my hand. I knew the way I finished a signature. When I sign my name, the tail of the last E always curves up. On this document, the tail of the E trailed off straight, and the pressure was wrong. You could see where the pen had hesitated on the curve of the C. It was a tracing, or a very practiced forgery. Someone had used my identity to borrow money. I thought back to the power of attorney document I had signed years ago. Cynthia had said it was to help me pay bills, but that document gave her the legal right to sign for me. If she was using that, She wouldn't need to forge my signature. She could just sign her own name as my agent. The fact that someone had forged my signature meant they were trying to hide it. They didn't want a paper trail linking it back to Cynthia using the power of attorney. They wanted it to look like I had taken out the loan myself. I sat there on the cold floor, the sound of Brooke's laughter drifting down from upstairs. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about controlling me or being mean. This was criminal. They were not just spending my inheritance, they were actively burying me in debt. They were ruining my credit, my financial future, and my name, all while I scrubbed their toilets and cooked their meals. I looked at the date again, 4 months ago. I was still working at Skyline then. I was solvent. They had started stealing my future before I had even lost my job. I carefully folded the letter and slid it into the pocket of my sweatpants. I did not confront them this time. I learned my lesson from the townhouse argument. If I screamed, they would just kick me out and destroy the evidence. I needed to be smarter. I needed to be patient. I stood up and picked up my cleaning rag. I walked into the kitchen and started scrubbing the counters. My movements mechanical, but inside, my mind was racing. I was not just a daughter returning home anymore. I was a victim of identity theft living with the perpetrators, and if I was going to survive this, if I was going to get my life back, I had to stop acting like a family member and start acting like an investigator. I looked at Daniel, who was coming into the kitchen for a refill of his coffee. He smiled at me, a weak, tentative smile. "Coffee is fresh," I said, my voice flat. "Thanks, honey," he said. I watched him drink it. I realized then that he wasn't just a bystander. By staying silent, by signing those papers for the townhouse, he was an accomplice. The line had been drawn, and I was on the other side of it, alone, or so I thought. I didn't know it then, but the evidence I had just found was the thread that would eventually unravel their entire tapestry of lies. I just needed to pull it. I had to lie to get out of the house. That is what my life had reduced me to, a 29-year-old woman with a graduate degree, lying to her stepmother about needing to buy feminine hygiene products just so I could leave the premises for 1 hour without an interrogation. I drove my father's old sedan, which smelled of stale cigarettes and neglect, to the Lakeside Community Bank branch on the other side of town. I did not go to the branch near our house. I knew the tellers there. They knew Cynthia. They would probably greet me by asking how my lovely mother was doing. I needed anonymity. I walked into the bank wearing my least tattered pair of jeans and a coat I had managed to salvage from the back of my closet before Cynthia turned it into a donation pile. I kept my head down, clutching the crumpled notice I had found in the console table. "I need to speak to a manager regarding a loan inquiry." I told the receptionist. My voice was steady, but my hands were sweating inside my pockets. 10 minutes later, I was sitting across from a man named Mr. Henderson. He was a middle-aged man with a kind face and a tie that was slightly too wide. He looked at the letter I slid across the desk, then typed something into his computer. "Ah, yes," he said, peering over his spectacles. "Ms. Michelle McGee, we have been trying to reach you. This personal loan is 60 days past due. We were about to send it to collections." "I did not take out this loan," I said clearly. "I want to see the documentation. I want to see where the money went." He frowned, clicking his mouse a few times. "Well, that is strange. The funds were dispersed via wire transfer to an account ending in 459. That is a joint account." "I do not have a joint account," I said. He turned the monitor slightly so I could see. "It is a joint account under the names Brooke Lowell and Michelle McGee." My stomach dropped. Brooke, my stepsister, the girl who spent her days filming makeup tutorials and pretending to be a socialite. And Mr. Henderson continued, "This loan was secured. It is a collateralized loan. It is backed by the equity in a property at 412 Elm Street." The room seemed to tilt. They had not just taken a second mortgage. They were using my grandmother's house as a piggy bank for every member of the family. Brooke was essentially stripping the equity out of my inheritance to fund her lifestyle. And she was doing it in my name so that if the payments were missed, my credit would be the one destroyed. "Show me the signatures," I demanded. He printed out a document. It was a co-signed application. Here is Brooke Lowell's signature, and here is yours. I looked at the paper. Brooke's signature was flamboyant, huge loops and hearts over the eyes. Next to it was Michelle McGee. Again, it was the forgery. The hesitation marks were visible to the naked eye if you looked closely enough. "That is not my signature," I said, pointing at it, "and I never agreed to this." "Mr. Henderson looked uncomfortable. "Ms. McGee, we have a power of attorney on file that authorizes these transactions. Even if you did not physically sign this specific paper, the authorization allows the primary holder to act on your behalf. The bank processed it based on that authority." "That power of attorney was for my internship," I said, my voice rising. "It was signed 7 years ago. It was temporary." He pulled up another file. "I am looking at the document right now. Ma'am, it is a general durable power of attorney. There is no expiration date listed. Unless you filed a formal revocation with the county and notified us, it remains valid indefinitely. Cynthia Lowell is listed as the agent. Did she authorize this?" I sat back in the chair, feeling the blood drain from my face. Indefinitely. Cynthia had tricked me. She had handed me a standard form to help with student bills, but she had actually had me sign away my rights forever. She had weaponized my trust from day one. "I want to revoke it," I said. "Right now, I want to freeze everything." "You can certainly file a revocation," Mr. Henderson said, handing me a form, "but that stops future transactions. It does not erase the debt that has already been incurred. You and Ms. Lowell are jointly liable for this $15,000, and if it is not paid, the bank will move to foreclose on the collateral, the townhouse." I walked out of the bank with a stack of papers and a heart heavy with dread. I had the answer, but the answer was worse than the mystery. They were not just stealing from me. They were systematically dismantling my entire existence. I drove back to the mansion, parking the sedan down the street so I could compose myself before facing them. I checked my phone. I had restricted my data usage to save money, but I turned it on for a second to check my email. A notification from a social media app popped up. I rarely used it anymore, but I saw that I had been tagged in a post. It was from Brooke. I opened the app. The photo was a black and white selfie of Brooke, looking artfully distressed, holding a cup of tea, staring out a window. The caption read, "It is so hard when you try to help family, but some people just want to take and take. Mental health is real. Guys, it is exhausting dealing with toxic ungratefulness in your own home. Sending love to everyone who supports me. #family struggles. #boundary setting." She did not name me. She did not have to. Everyone knew who she was talking about. I was the charity case living in her house. I scrolled down to the comments. My hands shook as I read them. There was a comment from Aunt Linda. "My father's sister. Stay strong. Sweetie, you and your mom are saints for putting up with her." There was one from my cousin Mark. "Some people just refuse to grow up. Do not let her drag you down. Brooke." There was even a comment from an old neighbor. "I saw her the other day. She looks terrible. Drugs? You guys are too good to her." I felt a hot tear slide down my cheek. They were controlling the narrative. To the outside world, I was the unstable, drug-addicted, ungrateful daughter who had failed at life and was leeching off her generous stepmother. Cynthia and Brooke had insulated themselves perfectly. If I tried to speak up now, I would just look like the crazy person they had painted me to be. I wiped the tear away angrily. No, I would not cry. Crying was for victims. I was not a victim anymore. I was a witness. I drove the rest of the way to the house. I walked in the back door, carrying the feminine products bag I had bought at a gas station as a prop. Cynthia was in the living room, on the phone, laughing. "Oh, I know," she was saying. "We are trying to get her into therapy, but she is so resistant. It is heartbreaking, really." She was talking about me. She was spreading the poison in real time. I walked past her, head down, acting the part of the beaten dog. I went straight to the attic room. That night, the house went quiet around 11 o'clock. I waited until I heard the distinct snoring of my father from the master suite. I crept out of my room. I did not go to the kitchen. I went to the small study where the family printer was kept. I had the stack of papers from the bank hidden under my sweater. I turned the printer on. It made a whirring noise that sounded like a jet engine in the silence. I froze, waiting for footsteps. Nothing. I began to scan and copy. I copied the bank loan application. I copied the mortgage document I had found earlier. I logged into my old email account, the one Cynthia did not have the password to, and forwarded every suspicious email I could find from the last 5 years. Notices of address changes I had never requested. Confirmations of credit card applications I had never made. I had found an old, battered binder in the basement a few days ago. It was dusty and smelled of mildew. I had cleaned it off. I punched holes in the documents. Clack, clack. The sound was satisfying. It was the sound of order being imposed on chaos. I placed the bank papers in the binder, then the mortgage papers, then the screenshots of Brooke's social media post, and the hateful comments. I took a black permanent marker and wrote a single word on the spine of the binder. Control. This was my shield. This was my weapon. The next morning, I added a new layer to my strategy. I dug out an old digital voice recorder I had used in college for lectures. It still worked. I taped it to the underside of the kitchen island, right where Cynthia usually held court. I pressed record before I started my morning chores. That afternoon, I caught Cynthia berating the landscaper. "I am not paying you for this," she screeched. "You missed the hedges on the north side. Do you think I am stupid? Do you think I am made of money?" Then, later, I caught a conversation between Cynthia and Brooke. "Mom, did you transfer the money for my trip to Cabo?" Brooke asked. "I am moving it from the trust account today," Cynthia replied. "Just keep your receipts. We will mark it as medical expenses for Michelle if anyone asks. Say it was for her rehab consultation." "You are a genius," Brooke giggled. My blood boiled as I listened to the playback later in my room. They were using my name to launder their embezzlement. I saved the file. I backed it up to a cloud drive Cynthia did not know existed. I had enough. I needed to try one last time. I needed to see if there was anything left of my father to save. I found Daniel in the garage. He was polishing his golf clubs, a mindless, repetitive task he did to avoid being inside the house with his wife. "Dad," I said, stepping into the dim light. He flinched. "Michelle, you startled me." "We need to talk," I said. "Real talk, not the nonsense Cynthia feeds you." "Michelle, please," he sighed, rubbing a spot on his 9-iron. "I do not want to argue." "I went to the bank today," I said. "I know about the loan Brooke took out in my name. I know about the power of attorney you let me sign. I know you are letting them bankrupt me." He stopped polishing. He did not look at me. He looked at the concrete floor. "It is not like that," he mumbled. "It is just... Family finances are complex. Cynthia is handling it. She is trying to protect our assets." "Protect our assets?" I laughed, a harsh, dry sound. "She is framing me. Dad, she is ruining my life to pay for Brooke's vacations. And you are letting her. That is Grandma's house. That was your mother's legacy to me. How can you let them do this?" He finally looked at me. His eyes were watery, red-rimmed, and weak. I saw a man who had been hollowed out, eaten alive by a predator he had invited into his bed. "Michelle," he whispered, you need to lower your voice. If she hears you, it will only get worse. Just let it go. Please, for me, do not make a fuss. We have a roof over our heads. Isn't that enough?" I stared at him. The silence stretched between us, thick and final. "No," I said softly. "It is not enough." I turned and walked out of the garage. I left him there with his golf clubs and his cowardice. I realized then that I was truly an orphan. My mother was dead, and my father was gone, replaced by this husk of a man who would sell his own daughter to keep the peace. I went back to my room and pulled out the control binder. I ran my hand over the plastic cover. This was not a family dispute. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a conspiracy. It was a calculated criminal enterprise designed to strip me of everything I had and leave me destitute. I was done crying. I was done begging my father for help. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I had found on an old business card in my wallet. It was for a man named Mateo Vargas, a guy I used to work with at Skyline who now worked in compliance. "Mateo?" I said when he answered. "It is Michelle McGee. I need a favor. A big one." The war had begun, and for the first time, I had ammunition. The coffee shop Mateo Vargas had chosen was a small, independent place in the Ohio City neighborhood, far enough from the suburbs that I did not have to worry about bumping into Cynthia or any of her country club friends. I sat in a booth in the back, my hands wrapped around a cup of black coffee that had gone cold 10 minutes ago. My control binder sat on the table between us, a heavy black brick of evidence that felt like it contained the radioactive remains of my life. I had told Cynthia I was going to the discount grocery store to buy bulk cleaning supplies. It was the only excuse she accepted without question, because it involved me doing manual labor and saving her money. I had exactly 90 minutes before she would start texting me, demanding to know where I was. Mateo looked different than I remembered. At Skyline Shield, we had been cubicle neighbors, bonding over bad vending machine coffee and the stress of quarterly reports. Now, sitting across from me in a crisp navy suit. He looked like a man who had his life together. He worked in the compliance division of Northcrest Credit Union now, hunting down money launderers and fraud. He had listened to me for 20 minutes without interrupting. He did not look at his phone. He did not drink his latte. He just watched me, his expression shifting from confusion to concern, and finally, to a hard, professional anger. "So," Mateo said, leaning back in the booth, "let me get this straight. You have a general durable power of attorney that you signed 7 years ago, which they are using to co-sign loans in your name, leverage your inheritance, and basically structure their entire lifestyle on your credit history." "Yes," I whispered, "and I cannot revoke it without them knowing. If I revoke it, the bank notifies them. If they find out I know, Cynthia kicks me out. I have no money. Mateo, I have $3.42 in my wallet right now. If I leave, I am homeless, and the debt follows me." Mateo shook his head, running a hand through his dark hair. "Michelle, this is textbook. We see this in compliance all the time. It is called financial exploitation of a dependent. Usually, we see it with elderly parents being scammed by their kids, but it works the other way around too. They have isolated you, made you dependent, and are bleeding you dry." He reached out and tapped the binder. "You did the right thing by copying everything," he said. "Most people just panic and scream. You gathered evidence. That is the analyst in you." "I feel crazy, Mateo," I admitted, my voice cracking. "My father, he just stands there. He knows. He signed the mortgage papers on my grandmother's house. He is letting them steal my legacy." "Stop," Mateo said firmly. "Do not emotionalize it. That is how they win. They want you to feel betrayed. They want you to feel sad. You need to stop looking at them as family and start looking at them as counterparties in a lawsuit. Do not argue with them. Do not scream at your dad. Arguments disappear into thin air. Paperwork lasts forever. Paperwork wins." He pulled a notepad from his jacket pocket and scribbled a name and an address. "I cannot represent you," Mateo said. "It would be a conflict of interest since I work for a financial institution, but you need a specialist. You need someone who eats people like Cynthia for breakfast." He tore the page off and slid it across the table. "Go here," he said. "The Lake Erie Justice Center. Ask for Aisha Coleman. She runs their financial abuse unit. I already sent her a text saying you might call. She is tough, Michelle. She does not care about country club memberships or social standing. She cares about the law." I looked at the name. Aisha Coleman. It felt like a lifeline thrown into a stormy sea. "Thank you," I said, blinking back tears. "I do not know how I can ever repay you." "You can repay me by getting your life back," Mateo said. "And by taking that binder to Aisha. Go, now. You do not have much time before your stepmother starts tracking you." I left the coffee shop with a renewed sense of purpose. I was not just a victim anymore. I was a client. I drove straight to the address Mateo had given me. The Lake Erie Justice Center was located in an older brick building downtown, the kind with flickering fluorescent lights in the hallway and linoleum floors that had seen better days. It was a far cry from the polished marble of the Reeves corporate offices, but right now, it looked like the most beautiful place on earth. The waiting room was full of people who looked tired, single mothers clutching folders, elderly men looking confused, people who had been chewed up by the system. I took a number and waited. When my number was called, I was led into a small, cluttered office stacked high with legal files. Aisha Coleman stood up from behind her desk. She was a striking woman with braids pulled back into a severe bun and eyes that seemed to X-ray right through my defenses. She did not smile, but her handshake was firm and warm. "Mateo says you are in a mess," Aisha said, gesturing for me to sit. "He says you are smart, but you are being played. Show me the binder." I placed the control binder on her desk for the next hour. The only sound in the room was the turning of pages and Aisha's occasional hum of disapproval. She read the mortgage documents. She studied the forged loan application. She looked at the screenshots of Brooke's social media posts. Finally, she closed the binder and looked at me. "This is not a family dispute, Michelle," Aisha said, her voice low and serious. "This is a criminal enterprise. You have forgery, wire fraud, identity theft, and elder abuse if we consider the misappropriation of your grandmother's estate intent. My father says it is just for the family's benefit." I said weaky. "He says I do not understand finance." Aisha scoffed. "Your father is an accomplice. He is using your credit to float a lifestyle he cannot afford. And this power of attorney? It is their golden ticket. They are counting on you being too scared and too broke to fight back." She pulled a form from her drawer. "We are going to stop them," she said. "But we have to be surgical. If we blow this up too early, they will destroy evidence. They will shred papers. They will hide the money. We need to lock it down first." "What do we do?" I asked. "First, I need you to sign this," she said, sliding a document toward me. "This authorizes the Justice Center to pull a full, forensic title search on every property linked to your name and your trust. Not just what you know about, everything. I want to see how deep this rot goes." I signed the paper. My hand was steady. "Now," Aisha said, leaning forward, "you go back to that house. You continue to scrub their floors. You continue to be the meek, beaten-down girl. Do not give them a single reason to suspect that you have hired a lawyer. You are a spy now. Michelle, can you do that?" "I can do it," I said. "I have been doing it for months." "Good," she said. "I need a week. Come back next Tuesday. Same time." The week that followed was the longest of my life. I went back to the mansion and played my role. I cooked elaborate dinners that Cynthia complained about. I cleaned the mud off Brooke's boots. I listened to my father mumble excuses while he hid in his study. Every time Cynthia insulted me, every time she made a comment about how lucky I was that she took me in, I visualized Aisha Coleman sitting at her desk, sharpening the blade that would cut their strings. I kept the recorder running in the kitchen. I captured Cynthia bragging to a friend on the phone about how she had handled the tuition payments for Brooke's online fashion course by moving some assets around. I knew exactly whose assets she was talking about. Finally, Tuesday arrived. I told Cynthia I had a follow-up appointment at a free clinic for a migraine condition I had invented. I drove back to the Justice Center, my heart hammering against my ribs. When I walked into Aisha's office, the mood was different. The clutter was gone from her desk. There was only one file sitting there, and Aisha looked rattled. She stared at me for a long moment before speaking. "Sit down, Michelle," she said. I sat, gripping the arms of the chair. "Is it bad? Did they spend it all? Is the townhouse gone?" "The townhouse is still there, though it is heavily leveraged," Aisha said. "But that is not what we found. That is the small stuff." She opened the file. When we ran the title search and cross-referenced the trust documents, we found a discrepancy. She explained. "We found a series of blocked communications. Certified letters regarding the administration of the Reeves family trust. My trust? I asked. The one my mother left? No, Aisha said. The main trust. The one controlled by Leonard Reeves. My breath caught in my throat. My grandfather? I have not spoken to him in years. He cut me off. Aisha looked at me with a mixture of pity and intensity. Did he cut you off, Michelle? Or did someone tell you he cut you off? She spun the file around so I could see a letter on top. It was on heavy, cream-colored stationery with the letterhead of Reeves and Bayfield, my grandfather's law firm. This letter was sent 6 months ago, Aisha said. It was addressed to you, here at the Justice Center's partner organization for legal aid. Strangely enough, but it was returned. Then it was sent to your father's house. It was signed for by Cynthia Lowell. I looked at the letter. It was a formal notification of a trust review. We dug deeper, Aisha continued. We contacted the firm directly. We used your authorization to speak to the senior partner. Michelle, your grandfather has been trying to send you money for years. Quarterly distributions, birthday gifts, dividends from the company stock. I never got a dime, I whispered. Cynthia told me he stopped sending them. He did not stop, Aisha said. Cynthia used the power of attorney to intercept the checks. She deposited them into an account she controls, under the pretense that she was managing them for you. She has been stealing directly from Leonard Reeves and telling you he abandoned you. I felt the room spin. All those years, all the pain of thinking my grandfather didn't love me, all the nights I cried myself to sleep wondering what I had done wrong. It was all a lie. A profitable lie orchestrated by the woman who was currently making me scrub her toilets. There is more, Aisha said, her voice dropping to a whisper. The lawyers at Reeves and Bayfield told us something else. Your grandfather has been suspicious. He has been asking questions about why you never write back to thank him. He has been asking why you never cash the personal checks he sends. What did they tell him? I asked. Cynthia has been writing letters back, Aisha said. She has been forging your signature on thank you notes, but she made a mistake. In the last note, she, posing as you, asked for a large sum of cash to be released for a business venture. That raised a red flag. Leonard Reeves is sharp. He put a freeze on the trust 2 weeks ago. Aisha leaned back. He is looking for you, Michelle. He has his own investigators looking into the accounts, but he is being blocked by the very people who are sheltering you. He doesn't hate me, I said, the realization washing over me like a warm wave. He doesn't hate me. No, Aisha said. He thinks you are a spoiled, greedy granddaughter who only wants cash, because that is the character Cynthia has created for you in her letters, but he is starting to doubt the story. She stood up and walked to the window. We need to bring him in, Aisha said, but we cannot just call him. Cynthia screens the calls. If we send a letter, she burns it. We need him to see the truth with his own eyes. How? I asked. The lawyers at Reeves and Bayfield said Leonard is planning a surprise visit, Aisha said, turning back to me with a small, triumphant smile. He wants to confront you about the business venture request. He is coming to Cleveland, to your father's house. I gasped. When? We do not know the exact day, Aisha said. But he is coming, and when he gets there, he is expecting to find a high society brat living off his money. We need to make sure he finds the truth instead. So I keep cleaning, I said, understanding the plan. I let him see me. Exactly, Aisha said. You do not clean yourself up. You do not hide the rags. You let him walk in and see exactly what his money has been funding. You let the image of you on your knees destroy Cynthia's entire narrative. I stood up. My legs felt stronger than they had in years. The shame was gone, replaced by a cold, hard determination. He is coming, I repeated. He is coming, Aisha confirmed. And when he walks through that door, we will have the legal file ready to hand to him. We will have the proof of the forgery, the theft, and the lies. But the most powerful evidence will be you. I walked out of the Justice Center into the bright afternoon sun. The city looked different. The noise of the traffic sounded like music. I drove back to the mansion. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw Cynthia standing on the porch, tapping her foot. "Where have you been?" she demanded as I got out of the car. "The floor in the hallway is sticky, and Brooke needs her tea." I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the lines of stress around her eyes, the desperate need for control. I saw a woman who was standing on a trapdoor, unaware that the latch had just been pulled. "I am sorry, Cynthia," I said, forcing my voice to sound submissive. "I will get the bucket." "You better," she snapped. "And wear the gray sweater, the one with the holes. We are not ruining good clothes for floor scrubbing." "Yes, ma'am," I said. I went inside and put on the rags. I filled the bucket with water. I got down on my knees and started to scrub. But as the brush moved back and forth, I wasn't thinking about the dirt. I was thinking about the black SUV that was somewhere out there on the highway, carrying the lion who was coming to reclaim his cub. I scrubbed, and I waited. The fluorescent lights of the Lake Erie Justice Center hummed with a low, electric buzz that seemed to vibrate against my skull. I was sitting across from Aisha Coleman again, but this time, the atmosphere in the small office was not investigative. It was heavy with the weight of a revelation that was about to alter the gravitational pull of my entire universe. Aisha had a stack of documents in front of her. These were not the papers I had brought. These were new. They were printed on thick, cream-colored linen paper, the kind that whispered of old money and serious legal power. The letterhead at the top was embossed in navy blue ink: Reeves and Bayfield, attorneys at law. "You need to breathe, Michelle," Aisha said, her voice unusually soft, "because what I am about to show you is going to hurt, but it is the good kind of hurt. It is the kind of hurt that happens when a broken bone is finally set back into place." I nodded, my hands gripping the edge of her scratched wooden desk. "Just tell me, did they steal it all? Is the trust fund empty?" "No," Aisha said. "The trust is not empty. In fact, it has grown, but that is not the point. The point is this." She slid the first document toward me. It was a photocopy of a certified mail envelope. The date stamp was from 3 years ago. The addressee was Ms. Michelle McGee. The address was my father's house, the mansion where I was currently sleeping in the attic. Across the front of the envelope, in aggressive red ink, was a stamp: "Returned to sender, refused." Below the stamp, there was a handwritten note in a script I knew better than my own. "Recipient no longer resides at this address. No forwarding address." The handwriting belonged to Cynthia. "She sent it back," I whispered. "She told them I did not live there." "Keep looking," Aisha said, sliding another paper across. This one was dated 2 years ago. Another envelope, another return to sender, and another note: "Please stop harassing this family. Michelle McGee has severed ties." My chest tightened until I could barely draw breath. Severed ties? I was living in the guest room. I was eating dinner with them every night. "Cynthia has been systematically blocking every attempt your grandfather's firm has made to contact you," Aisha explained, her finger tracing the timeline on the papers. And it was not just legal notices, it was personal correspondence. She handed me a copy of a letter. It was typed, but signed in blue fountain pen. The signature was shaky but unmistakable: Leonard Reeves. I read the text through blurred vision. "My dearest Michelle, it has been 2 years since I heard your voice. The holidays are approaching, and the house feels terribly empty without you. I know you are busy with your new life and your independence, and I respect your desire for space, but please know that my door is always open. I have deposited the quarterly distribution into the account your stepmother manages for you. I hope it helps with your student loans. Please call when you can. Love, Grandpa." I let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. I covered my mouth with my hand, rocking back and forth in the hard plastic chair. "He didn't know," I choked out. "He thought I was ignoring him. He thought I was too busy." "He thought you were indifferent," Aisha corrected gently. "Because that is the narrative Cynthia fed him. Every time he sent a check, she cashed it using the power of attorney. Every time he sent a letter, she intercepted it. She created a wall of silence. She made him believe you were a cold, ungrateful granddaughter who only cared about the money, while she made you believe he was a cold, distant grandfather who had forgotten you existed. I looked at the letter again. I have deposited the quarterly distribution. How much? I asked, looking up at Aisha. How much money did she steal? Aisha opened a spreadsheet. Based on the records from Reeves and Bayfield, the quarterly distributions over the last 5 years total close to $400,000. That money was intended for you. It was deposited into an account at Lakeside Community Bank that Cynthia controls, the same bank where she forced you to take out that loan. She stole $400,000 from me, I said, the number rolling off my tongue like a curse. And then she made me scrub her floors because she said I was a burden. It gets worse, Aisha said. Or better, depending on how you look at it, because Cynthia got greedy, and greed makes people sloppy. Aisha pulled out a final document. It was an email printout, dated only 2 weeks ago. Remember I told you that Leonard Reeves had started asking questions? Aisha asked. I nodded. Well, it seems Cynthia tried to push her luck. She forged a letter from you asking for an emergency release of funds from the principal of the trust. She claimed you needed $50,000 for a business liability settlement. She tried to make it look like you were in legal trouble. I have never been in legal trouble in my life, I said. Exactly, Aisha said. And Leonard knows that. He knows you. He knows you are cautious. That request did not sound like you. So, instead of sending the check, he instructed his lawyers to run a credit check on you. He wanted to see what this liability was. Aisha leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with intensity. And do you know what he found? Michelle? He found the loan at Lakeside Community Bank, the one co-signed by Brooke, the one secured by your grandmother's townhouse. He saw the high interest rates. He saw the missed payments. He knows about the debt. I realized. He thinks I am drowning. He thinks you are drowning. Yes, Aisha said, but he also saw something else. He saw that the contact email on the Lakeside loan application was not yours. It was Clowell@provider.net. Cynthia's email. I sat back, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place with the force of a slamming door. He knows, I said. He might not know the whole story, but he knows something is wrong. He knows Cynthia is involved. He knows enough to be furious, Aisha said. We spoke to the senior partner at his firm this morning. Leonard Reeves has ordered a full forensic audit of every dime he has ever sent to Cleveland, and he is not waiting for the report. Aisha paused for effect, letting the silence hang in the air. He is coming here, Michelle, she said. Leonard Reeves is on his way to Cleveland right now. He is driving up from Cincinnati. He wants to see the books. He wants to see the house. And most importantly, he wants to see you. My heart hammered against my ribs. He is coming? To the house? Yes, Aisha said. This is why we have to be smart. Everything inside you is going to want to run home and scream at Cynthia. You are going to want to throw these papers in her face, but you cannot do that. Why not? I demanded. I have the proof. I have the letters. Because if you confront her now, before he arrives, she will spin it. Aisha warned. She will say you stole the mail. She will say you are mentally unstable. She will hide the bank books. She will coach Daniel and Brooke to lie. She is a master manipulator. Michelle, if you give her a 2-hour head start, she will turn this around on you. So what do I do? I asked, my hands shaking. You go back to that house, Aisha commanded. You put on those rags she makes you wear. You get down on your knees, and you scrub that floor. You let the stage be set exactly the way she designed it. When Leonard walks through that door, I want him to see the reality. I want him to see his heiress looking like a Cinderella who never made it to the ball. The visual impact of that will be more powerful than any lawsuit I can file. It is a trap, I said, understanding the cruelty and the brilliance of the plan. We are letting her trap herself. We are handing her the rope, Aisha agreed, and we are letting her tie the knot. Meanwhile, I am preparing a petition for an emergency injunction. As soon as Leonard arrives and witnesses the situation, we will file. We will freeze her accounts. We will freeze Daniel's accounts. We will lock the doors on her entire operation. I looked at the file on the desk. The control binder I had made was sitting next to Aisha's professional dossier. Together, they were a weapon of mass destruction. I have to go back, I said, standing up. I have to be there when he gets there. Be careful, Aisha said. She is dangerous because she is desperate. Do not break character. Not yet. I walked out of the Justice Center, but I did not feel like the same woman who had walked in. I wasn't just Michelle McGee, the unemployed victim. I was the beloved granddaughter of Leonard Reeves. I was loved. I had always been loved. The drive back to the suburbs was a blur. I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting to see a black SUV with tinted windows, but the road was empty. When I pulled into the driveway of the mansion, the house loomed over me, massive and imposing. Usually, looking at it made me feel small. Today, it looked like a house of cards waiting for a strong wind. I entered through the kitchen door. Cynthia was there, arranging flowers in a crystal vase. She looked up, her eyes scanning me for any sign of rebellion. "You were gone a long time," she said suspiciously. "Did you get the cleaning supplies?" "Yes," I said, keeping my head down. "The store was busy." "Well, hurry up," she snapped. "The Parkers are coming for brunch in an hour. And look at this floor. There is a stain near the entryway. I want it gone before they get here." "I will take care of it," I said. "And change into your work clothes," she added, wrinkling her nose. "You smell like downtown. I do not want you smelling like the city when guests are here. Put on the gray set." "The gray set," I repeated. "The rags. The uniform of my humiliation." "Yes," she said. "And fix your hair. You look manic." I went up to the attic. I took off my jeans and put on the oversized, moth-eaten sweater. I put on the sweatpants with the tear in the leg. I looked at myself in the cracked mirror. I looked pathetic. I looked broken. But for the first time, I smiled. It was a cold, hard smile. "Let him see," I thought. "Let him see exactly what you have done to me." I went back downstairs. I filled the bucket with hot water and lemon cleaner. I walked to the entryway. Right at the foot of the grand staircase, I got down on my knees. I dipped the brush in the water. Scrub. I thought about the $400,000. Scrub. I thought about the letter from Grandpa that I never got to read. Scrub. I thought about my mother, and how she would have burned this house to the ground if she knew what was happening. Scrub. "Harder!" Cynthia yelled from the top of the stairs. "I can still see the shadow of the stain." "I am trying," I called back, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Try harder," she screamed. "God, you are useless. Sometimes I wonder why I even bother keeping you around." I heard a car engine outside, a heavy, powerful engine. My heart stopped. I looked at the heavy oak door. It was just wood and brass, but it was the only thing separating the lie from the truth. I heard a car door slam. Cynthia didn't hear it. She was too busy looking for flaws in my work. She came down a few steps, a wet rag in her hand, ready to throw it at me if I missed a spot. "If this isn't perfect by the time I come back down," she threatened, "you are sleeping in the garage tonight." She threw the rag. It hit my shoulder with a wet slap. I flinched, but I didn't look away from the door. Ring. The doorbell chimed. The sound echoed through the house like a judgment. "Daniel!" Cynthia shouted. "Get the door!" Daniel didn't move from the kitchen. "You get it!" she screamed at me. "Go! Look at you! You are already dirty! Go open it! Let them see what a mess you are!" I stood up. My knees were wet. My hands were red. I walked to the door. I reached for the handle. "Here we go," I thought. I pulled the door open. And there he was. Grandpa Leonard stood there, leaning on his cane, the November wind blowing his silver hair. He looked exactly as he had in my memories, only fiercer. He looked like a storm that had finally made landfall. He looked at me. He looked at the rags. He looked at the bucket. Then he looked past me, at Cynthia frozen on the stairs. He said, the sound rumbling deep in his chest, "I arrived just in time to see the truth here." The trap had sprung, and they were all inside it with me. The silence that followed my grandfather's declaration was brief, shattered almost instantly by the sheer, terrifying adaptability of Cynthia Lowell. For a fraction of a second, I saw the panic in her eyes, the raw, animal fear of a woman watching her meticulously constructed world teeter on the edge of a cliff. But then, like a switch had been flipped, the mask slammed back into place. It was a performance so seamless, so audacious, that if I hadn't been the victim of it for years, I might have applauded. "Leonard!" Cynthia cried out, her voice pitching up into a register of delighted surprise. She rushed down the remaining stairs, her heels clicking rapidly on the wood, stepping right over the wet rag she had thrown at me moments before. She reached him and threw her arms open, bypassing his cane, bypassing the cold formality of his stance, and enveloped him in a hug that he did not return. "Oh my goodness, what a wonderful surprise," she gushed, pulling back but keeping her hands on his shoulders, framing herself as the welcoming matriarch. "We had no idea you were coming. If we had known, we would have prepared the guest suite. Daniel, look, it is your father." My father, Daniel, was still standing in the kitchen doorway, clutching his coffee mug like a shield. He looked pale, his eyes darting between his wife and his father. He looked like a man who wanted to dissolve into the drywall. "Dad," Daniel stammered, walking forward slowly. "Profound. Good to see you." Grandfather Leonard did not smile. He did not hug Cynthia back. He simply stood there, solid as a mountain, his blue eyes tracking the movement of the room. He looked at Cynthia's hands on his coat. Then he looked at me. I was still standing by the open door, shivering slightly in the cold wind. My hands red and raw, the bucket of dirty water at my feet. I did not speak. I remembered Aisha's words. Let the image do the work. "I apologize for the mess," Cynthia said, following his gaze and letting out a nervous, tinkling laugh. "We are having a bit of a situation with the cleaning staff, or lack thereof. Poor Michelle insisted on helping out. You know how she gets. She gets these manic bursts of energy where she just has to scrub something. We tell her to rest, but she is so stubborn." She turned to me, her eyes flashing a warning that promised retribution later. "Michelle, darling," she said, her voice dripping with fake maternal concern. "Go upstairs and get cleaned up. You look like a drowned rat. Honestly, what will your grandfather think? We have guests coming. Go change, now." It was a dismissal. She wanted me off the stage. She wanted to erase the evidence before Leonard could inspect it too closely. I did not argue. I did not defend myself. I simply nodded, picked up the bucket, because that is what the maid does, and walked toward the back hallway. As I passed Leonard, he didn't say a word to me, but his eyes followed me. He looked at the tear in my sweatpants. He looked at the bruise on my shoulder where the rag had hit. He looked at the way I walked, head down, shoulders hunched. It was a clinical observation. He was cataloging the damage. "We were just about to sit down for an early lunch," I heard Cynthia saying as I turned the corner. "I will have the caterers add a setting. Come, Leonard, let me take your coat. You must be freezing." "I am not cold." Leonard's voice drifted back to me, deep and unyielding. "And I am not here for the caterers." I ran up the back stairs to the attic. My heart was pounding a rhythm against my ribs that felt like a war drum. He saw. I stripped off the wet, dirty clothes. I wanted to burn them, but I threw them in the corner instead. I went to the small closet where I kept the few things Cynthia hadn't destroyed or sold. I pulled out a simple black dress. It was old, from my days at Skyline Shield, but it was clean and tailored. I brushed my hair back, securing it in a tight bun. I washed the dirt off my face. I looked in the mirror. I didn't see the servant anymore. I saw the granddaughter of Leonard Reeves. I saw the woman who had built a file named Control. I waited. I let them have 10 minutes. I let Cynthia spin her web of lies downstairs, knowing that every word she spoke was just another knot in the noose around her neck. When I walked back down, the atmosphere in the house had shifted. The tension was so thick it felt physical, like walking through water. They were in the formal dining room, The table was set with the good china, the Royal Doulton set that had belonged to my mother. Cynthia never used it because she said it was dated, but today it was laid out to impress. There were platters of expensive food, smoked salmon, artisanal cheeses, pastries from the French bakery in town. It was a feast fit for a king, or perhaps a bribe for a judge. Leonard sat at the head of the table. He hadn't touched the food. His hands were folded on the tablecloth, resting next to a glass of water. Cynthia sat to his right, leaning in, talking animatedly. Daniel sat to his left, staring at his plate, and Brooke was there now, sitting next to Cynthia. She had obviously been summoned and briefed. She was wearing a modest pastel dress, looking like the picture of innocence, her phone nowhere in sight. "Ah, there she is," Cynthia said as I entered the room. Her smile was tight, her eyes hard. "Feeling better, dear? Sit down. Have some salmon." She gestured to the empty seat at the far end of the table, opposite Leonard. The distance was deliberate. She wanted me as far away from him as possible. I sat down. I did not take any food. I folded my hands in my lap and looked at my grandfather. "We were just telling grandfather about your struggles," Brooke said, her voice soft and full of concern. She looked at Leonard, batting her eyelashes. "It has been really hard on Mom and Dad, you know, trying to help Michelle get back on her feet, but she is so resistant to structure." "Is that so?" Leonard asked. His voice was neutral, unreadable. "Oh, yes," Brooke continued, emboldened. "I mean, we offered to pay for therapy. We offered to help her find a job, but she refuses everything. And the spending, it is like an addiction. She buys things she does not need, and then she gets angry when we try to set boundaries. That is why she was cleaning today. Mom said she needs to learn the value of work, to ground herself." "The value of work," Leonard repeated. "That is a very important lesson." "Exactly," Cynthia chimed in, pouring sparkling water into Leonard's glass. "We are practicing tough love. Leonard, it breaks my heart to see her like this, so lost, so angry, but we cannot keep bailing her out. She has to learn responsibility. You of all people understand that. You built an empire on hard work." "I did," Leonard agreed. He turned his gaze to Brooke. "And speaking of building, Cynthia tells me you are quite the entrepreneur. Brooke, a brand ambassador, is it?" "Yes, sir," Brooke beamed, sitting up straighter. "I have over 50,000 followers. I influence lifestyle trends." "Impressive," Leonard said. "And does this influence pay well?" "It is building," Brooke said, a little hesitantly. "But Mom and Dad have been so supportive. They invested in my startup costs." "Invested," Leonard said, testing the word. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. The sound of the fabric moving was the only sound in the room. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't the legal file Aisha had. It was something smaller, a single sheet. "I have been reviewing some investments myself," Leonard said casually. "I was looking over the trust records. There was a request recently, $50,000, for a business liability settlement regarding Michelle." Cynthia froze. Her fork halted halfway to her mouth. "Oh," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Yes, well, that was a private matter. We did not want to burden you with the details. Leonard, it was embarrassing for Michelle." "I see," Leonard said. "And the loan? The one from Lakeside Community Bank?" The color drained from Brooke's face. She looked at Cynthia, panic flaring in her eyes. "What loan?" Daniel asked, looking up suddenly. "I thought we agreed." "Quiet, Daniel," Cynthia snapped, cutting him off. She turned back to Leonard, her smile now looking like a rictus of terror. "Leonard, really? This is hardly the time to discuss boring financial paperwork. We haven't seen you in years. Let's talk about the market. Let's talk about your trip." "I am talking about the market," Leonard said. "I am talking about the market of truth. I found a loan application. Cynthia, co-signed by Brooke Lowell and Michelle McGee, secured by the townhouse on Elm Street." He placed the paper on the table. It was a copy of the loan document. "Oh, now," Leonard said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I am confused. You tell me Michelle is irresponsible with money. You tell me she is drowning in debt. Yet, this document shows that she, or someone using her name, has excellent credit, good enough to secure $15,000 at a prime rate. And strangely, the contact email on this application belongs to you. Cynthia." Cynthia's mouth opened and closed like a fish on dry land. I was helping her manage it. She begged me. She needed the money for gambling debts. Yes, gambling. She was in trouble. Leonard, we had to save the house. I put my email down so I could make sure the payments were made. Gambling, Leonard said flatly. First it was a business liability. Now it is gambling. Michelle has had a very busy month. He turned his gaze to Brooke. And you, young lady, you co-signed this loan. Did Michelle ask you to do that? Did she come to you, begging for help with her gambling debts? Brooke looked at me. I sat there, stone-faced. I did not blink. I did not offer her a lifeline. I don't know, Brooke stammered, tears welling up in her eyes. Real tears this time. Tears of fear. Mom told me to sign it. She said it was for the family. She said Michelle needed it and we had to help. She said Michelle needed it, Leonard repeated. So you signed a legal document obligating my granddaughter to $15,000 of debt without asking her? I was helping, Brooke wailed. Why are you being so mean? We are the ones who have been taking care of her. Taking care of her, Leonard said. He looked around the opulent dining room, at the crystal chandelier, at the silk curtains. Then he looked at me, sitting in my old dress, my hands still red from the bleach. I saw how you take care of her when I walked in the door, Leonard said. I saw the rags, I saw the bucket, and now I'm hearing about loans and gambling and liabilities. Cynthia stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. How dare you, she hissed, abandoning the nice stepmother act. You come into my house, after ignoring us for years, and you interrogate us? We took this girl in when she had nothing. We fed her. We clothed her. And yes, maybe we had to manage her finances because she is incompetent. She lost her job. Leonard, she is a failure. We did what we had to do to survive. To survive? Leonard asked calmly. Or to maintain a lifestyle you could no longer afford? You do not know what you are talking about, Cynthia screamed. She is a liar. She has been poisoning you against us. Whatever she told you, it is a lie. Leonard did not look at Cynthia. He turned his head slowly, deliberately, to look at me. The room went silent. Daniel was shaking, his head in his hands. Brooke was sobbing into her napkin. Cynthia was breathing hard, her chest heaving, her eyes wild with desperation. But Leonard was looking only at me. His eyes were soft, filled with a mixture of sorrow and pride. I have heard from the bank, Leonard said to me. I have heard from the lawyers. I have heard from Cynthia, and I have heard from Brooke. He leaned forward slightly. But I have not heard from you. Michelle, you have been very quiet. I met his gaze. I felt the weight of the control binder in my memory. I felt the ghost of Aisha Coleman standing behind me. I felt the years of silence, the years of missed letters, the years of believing I was unloved. I want to hear the truth, Leonard said, his voice gentle but absolute. I want to hear it from Michelle. I took a deep breath. The air in the room tasted like ozone, sharp and electric. I placed my hands flat on the table. The truth, I said, my voice steady, carrying none of the trembling fear that used to define me in this house. The truth, grandfather, is that I did not sign that loan. Cynthia gasped. The truth, I continued, is that I never received your letters. The truth is that I have not seen a penny of the $400,000 you sent me. And the truth is that the woman standing there is not protecting this family. She is eating it alive. I stood up. And I have the receipts to prove it. I reached down beneath my chair and pulled out the heavy black binder. I had named it Control because for the last 6 months, it was the only thing in my life that I actually controlled. I placed it on the table, It landed with a heavy, dull thud that rattled the delicate silver spoons and caused the water in the crystal glasses to tremble. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not throw the accusation like a grenade. I laid it out like a blueprint. "This," I said, my voice calm and steady, devoid of the trembling fear that had defined my existence in this house for years, "is a record of every financial transaction made in my name since the day I signed that power of attorney 7 years ago. It contains the dates, the amounts, and the fraudulent signatures used to authorize them." Cynthia's face went from pale to a mottled, angry red. She slammed her hand down on the table. "This is ridiculous," she shrieked, looking frantically at Leonard. "She has forged these. She has spent weeks in her room cutting and pasting papers to frame me because she is jealous. She is jealous of Brooke. She is jealous of the life we have built." "Silence," Leonard said. It wasn't a shout. It was a command spoken with the weight of a man who had commanded boardrooms for 50 years. The single word sliced through Cynthia's hysteria like a guillotine blade. She snapped her mouth shut, her chest heaving. "You will let her speak," Leonard said, his blue eyes fixed on Cynthia with a look of absolute, freezing contempt. "And if you interrupt her again, I will have my driver remove you from this room. Do you understand?" Cynthia nodded, sinking back into her chair, her hands gripping the tablecloth so hard her knuckles turned white. I opened the binder. I flipped past the table of contents I had meticulously typed. I turned to the section tabbed in red. "Exhibit A," I said, sliding the binder toward the center of the table so Leonard could see, but keeping it out of Cynthia's reach. "The loan from Lakeside Community Bank. Date of application, August 14th of this year. Amount, $15,000. Purpose listed, home improvements. Applicant, Michelle McGee. Cosigner, Brooke Lowell." I looked at Brooke. She was staring at the tablecloth, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "I did not apply for this loan," I continued. "I was not making home improvements. I was living in your attic, sleeping on a mattress on the floor. The funds were wired to a joint account ending in 459. I do not have access to that account, but I have the bank statements here showing that 3 days after the wire transfer, a payment of $4,000 was made to a travel agency for a wellness retreat in Cabo San Lucas." I paused, letting the information sink in. "Brooke went to Cabo in August," I said. "I remember because I had to hand wash her bikinis when she got back." "You are a liar," Brooke sobbed, finally looking up. "I worked for that trip. My brand paid for it." "Your brand is insolvent, Brooke," I said coldly. "My credit score paid for it." I turned the page. "Exhibit B," I said. "The foreclosure notices on the townhouse at 412 Elm Street, Grandma's house, the house meant to be my safety net." I looked at my father. Daniel was staring at the binder as if it were a venomous snake. "Dad," I said, "you told me the house was being rented out. You told me the taxes were being paid by the trust. But here's the mortgage document, signed by Daniel Lowell as guardian. You took out $200,000 against the equity. Where did that money go? It did not go to me. It did not go to the property." I, Daniel stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "Cynthia said, she said it was for tax purposes. She said we needed to leverage the asset to protect it from capital gains." "You signed it, Dad," I said. "Did you read it?" "I trusted her," Daniel cried out, his voice cracking. "She is my wife. She handles the accounts. I just signed where she put the sticky note." "You signed away my inheritance without reading the paper," I said. "And because of that, the bank is 30 days away from seizing the property." Leonard reached into his own jacket pocket. He did not look at Daniel. He looked at Cynthia. "I have some documents of my own," Leonard said. He pulled out a sleek, leather-bound folder embossed with the Reeves and Bayfield logo. He opened it and placed a stack of envelopes on the table next to my binder. "For 3 years," Leonard said, his voice low and dangerous, "I have been sending letters to this house. Certified mail, personal letters, checks. I wanted to know how my granddaughter was doing. I wanted to be part of her life. He picked up the top envelope. It was yellowed with age. Return to sender, Leonard read. Refused. Addressee unknown. He looked at Cynthia. You told the post office she didn't live here, Leonard said. While she was sleeping under your roof, you erased her existence to keep me away. I was protecting you, Cynthia blurted out, her voice shrill. She was going through a phase. She was angry. She didn't want to talk to you. I didn't want you to be hurt by her rejection. I sent the mail back to spare your feelings. Leonard. And the checks? Leonard asked. Did you cash those to spare my feelings too? He pulled out a photocopied check. This is a check for $5,000, dated last Christmas. It is endorsed on the back. For deposit only, Michelle McGee. But look at the signature. He slid the paper toward me. I looked at it. It was the same shaky, hesitant forgery that was on the loan application. That is not my signature, I said clearly. I never saw this check. I know, Leonard said, because I had my forensic accountant analyze it this morning before I left Cincinnati. The handwriting matches the samples we have on file for Cynthia Lowell. The room went deathly silent. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, a clock that, ironically, had also belonged to my grandmother. But the worst part, Leonard said, his voice trembling slightly with suppressed rage, is not the money. I can replace the money. The worst part is the lie you told me to justify it. He looked at Cynthia, his eyes filled with a pain that was terrified to behold. Do you remember what you told me on the phone, Cynthia, 5 years ago, when I called to ask why Michelle never visited? Cynthia said nothing. She was breathing shallow, rapid breaths, her eyes darting around the room as if looking for an exit. You told me, Leonard continued, that Michelle had become spoiled. You told me she was entitled. You said, Leonard, do not spoil her anymore. If you keep giving her money, she will never learn to stand on her own 2 feet. She needs to struggle. She needs to hit rock bottom so she can appreciate what she has. You told me that if I loved her, I would cut her off. I felt a sharp pain in my chest. That was why. That was why he had stopped calling. He thought he was helping me. He thought he was participating in some grand lesson on character building, orchestrated by a woman he trusted. I listened to you, Leonard whispered. I stayed away because I thought I was helping my granddaughter become a strong woman, and all the while, you were starving her. You were dressing her in rags. You were beating her down and stealing the money I sent to help her. It was for the family, Cynthia cried. Finally finding her voice, she stood up, knocking her chair over. You do not understand. Leonard, Daniel's firm is bankrupt. It has been bankrupt for years. We have no income. We have mortgages on this house, on the cars, on everything. We were drowning. I did it to save the family name. I did it so your son wouldn't have to declare insolvency. So you cannibalized his daughter instead, Leonard said. She is young, Cynthia screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. She can work. She has a lifetime to make money. We are old. Leonard, we have a standard of living to maintain. We have a reputation in this town. What was I supposed to do? Let the bank take the mansion? Let everyone see that Daniel Lowell is a failure? You are selfish, Brooke yelled suddenly, turning on me. Her face was a mask of ugly, twisted entitlement. You are so selfish. Michelle, you lived here for free. You ate our food. And now you are going to ruin everything because of some stupid bank papers? We are your family. You are supposed to help us. Help you? I asked, my voice rising for the first time. I have been your maid. Brooke, I have been your driver. I have been your punching bag. And apparently, I have been your banker too. I picked up the control binder and slammed it shut. But I am not your victim anymore, and I am certainly not your family. You ungrateful little... Cynthia started to lunge across the table, her hand raised as if to strike me. Sit down. Leonard didn't shout. He didn't have to. He stood up. He was 80 years old. But in that moment, he looked 10 feet tall. He leaned on his cane, his knuckles white against the silver lion's head. You call this the common good? Leonard asked, his voice shaking with disgust. You call forgery, theft, and abuse for the benefit of the family? We can explain, Daniel whispered, finally looking up. Dad, please, we can work this out. We can pay it back. Just don't bring the lawyers into this. Leonard looked at his son. It was a look of profound disappointment, the kind that hurts more than anger. The lawyers are already here, Daniel, Leonard said. They have been here for days. Michelle brought them. He gestured to the folder I had brought. That binder doesn't just contain bank statements, Leonard said. I assume it also contains the revocation of the power of attorney? It does, I said, and a copy of the petition for an emergency injunction to freeze all assets associated with the Lowell estate, pending a fraud investigation. Cynthia's face went slack. The fight went out of her. She realized, finally, that this wasn't a family argument. This was a legal execution. You can't, she whispered. You can't freeze the accounts. The mortgage is due on Friday. If we don't pay it, we go into default. Then you will be in default, Leonard said, because as of this moment, neither you nor Daniel has access to a single penny of the Reeves fortune, and as for the money you stole from Michelle... He looked at me. I will see to it that every cent is recovered. Leonard promised. Even if I have to sell this house out from under you to do it. This is my house, Cynthia shrieked. My name is on the deed. Not for long, I said. I opened the binder one last time and pulled out the final document. It was the one Aisha had found just yesterday. Actually, Cynthia, I said, you used the Reeves family trust as a guarantor for the refinancing of this mansion 3 years ago. You forged my signature on that too, because I am a beneficiary of the trust, which means the trust holds the lien. I slid the paper across the table. It stopped right in front of her. And since the trust has declared the loan in default due to fraud, I said, the house belongs to the trust, which means, effectively, it belongs to grandfather. Cynthia stared at the paper. She looked at Daniel. She looked at Brooke. Then she looked at the empty air, realizing that the walls she had built to keep the world out had just collapsed on top of her. She had no explanation. She had no defense. The silence that filled the dining room was the sound of a kingdom crumbling into dust. I think, Leonard said, buttoning his jacket, that lunch is over. The dining room was silent, save for the sound of Cynthia's ragged breathing. It was the sound of a predator that had suddenly realized it was trapped in a cage of its own making. The control binder sat in the center of the table like a monolith, a black obelisk of truth that cast a long shadow over the ruins of their lies. Grandfather Leonard did not sit back down. He remained standing, his posture erect, his presence filling the room. He reached into his leather briefcase one last time. This time, he did not pull out a letter or a check. He pulled out a document bound in a blue legal cover, stamped with the official seal of the state of Ohio. You asked about the future, Leonard said, his voice devoid of the warmth I remembered from my childhood. It was now the voice of the CEO, the decision-maker who could close a factory with a stroke of a pen. You asked how we are going to resolve this. You seem to be under the impression, Cynthia, that this is a negotiation, that we can, as Daniel suggested, work this out. He slid the blue document across the polished mahogany table. It stopped directly in front of my father. There is nothing to work out, Leonard stated. The decisions have already been made. In fact, they were made 6 months ago. Daniel looked down at the document, his hands trembling so violently he could barely turn the cover page. What is this? Daniel whispered, his face ashen. That, Leonard said, is the Third Amendment to the Reeves Family Revocable Trust. It was executed shortly after my forensic accountants flagged the first discrepancy in the signature on my checks. I did not know the full extent of your betrayal then, but I knew enough to protect the legacy. Leonard looked at Cynthia, whose eyes were fixed on the document as if it were a death warrant. 6 months ago, Leonard continued, I removed both you, Cynthia Lowell, and you, Brooke Lowell, as beneficiaries of the trust, You were scrubbed from the list. You are no longer entitled to a stipend, a housing allowance, or a single cent of inheritance. You can't do that, Cynthia stammered, her voice thin and reedy. We have rights. I am your son's wife. You are a thief, Leonard corrected her, his voice cutting like a laser. And the trust has a morality clause. Specifically, it states that any beneficiary who engages in fraud, embezzlement, or criminal activity against the estate is automatically disinherited. By forging Michelle's signature, you activated that clause yourself. You cut your own throat. Cynthia. Cynthia slumped back in her chair, looking as if she had been physically struck. And you, Daniel, Leonard said, turning his gaze to his son, you are still a beneficiary. However, because you signed the guardianship papers that allowed this fraud to happen, you have been declared incompetent to manage your own distributions. Daniel let out a small, pathetic sound. Dad, please. Your portion of the estate, Leonard said, ignoring him, is now placed under the control of a court-appointed trustee. You will receive a small allowance for groceries and essentials. Nothing more, no country club dues, no golf trips, no luxury cars. Leonard turned to me. His expression softened, the ice melting from his blue eyes. That leaves one person, he said. One person who has shown resilience, intelligence, and despite your best efforts to break her, integrity. He pointed to the document. Turn to page 4. Daniel, read the name of the sole primary beneficiary and executor of the Cleveland assets. Daniel turned the page. He squinted at the text, then looked up at me, his eyes wide with shock. Michelle, he whispered. Michelle, Leonard repeated firmly, effective immediately. Michelle McGee is the sole trustee of the local assets. She controls the accounts, she controls the charitable giving, and most importantly, she controls the real estate. Real estate? Cynthia perked up, a flash of her old arrogance returning. This house is not part of the trust. This is our marital home. My name is on the deed. Leonard let out a short, dry laugh. It was a terrifying sound. Do you really not read the things you sign, Cynthia? He asked. When you refinanced the house 3 years ago to pay off your credit card debts, you needed a guarantor because Daniel's credit was ruined. You used the Reeves family trust as the guarantor, and in the fine print of that agreement, there is a default provision. He leaned forward, placing his hands on the table. If the borrowers, that is you and Daniel, engage in any fraudulent activity regarding the finances of the family, the loan is called immediately due, and if you cannot pay the full amount, which is currently $1,200,000, the title reverts instantly to the guarantor. The room went silent. The clock in the hallway ticked loudly. Talk, talk, talk. You committed fraud, Leonard said simply. We have the proof right here on the table. Therefore, the loan is in default. The title has reverted. He looked at me. Michelle, he said, this is not Cynthia's house. This is not Daniel's house. This house belongs to the Reeves Family Trust, and as the new trustee of the Cleveland assets, you are the landlord. I looked at Cynthia. I looked at the woman who had made me sleep in the attic, the woman who had made me scrub floors in rags while she drank mimosas, the woman who had treated me like a stray dog in the only home I had ever known. She wasn't the lady of the manor anymore. She was a guest, and she was a guest who had overstayed her welcome by about 10 years. You mean, Brooke squeaked, looking between us. You mean Michelle owns the house? I manage it, I corrected her, my voice calm. But yes, for all intents and purposes, I am the one who decides who lives here. Cynthia burst into tears. It was a theatrical, wailing performance, the kind she used to get out of speeding tickets. I did it for us, she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. It was the pressure. You do not understand the pressure of this society. I just wanted us to fit in. I wanted Daniel to be respected. I am a victim here too. The economy, the circumstances. I was just trying to hold it all together. She looked up at Leonard, mascara running down her cheeks. Leonard, please, I am sick. I have a compulsion. I need help. not punishment. You cannot throw us out on the street. We are family." "Family," I said, speaking up before Leonard could answer. "That is a funny word. Cynthia, was I family when you intercepted my mail? Was I family when you forged my name on a $15,000 loan? Was I family when you told me to wear rags and clean the floor so I would know my place?" "I was trying to teach you," she wailed. "I was trying to make you humble." "You were trying to break me," I said, "but you failed." Daniel stood up slowly. He looked at his wife, really looked at her. For the first time in years, he looked at the wreckage of his life. "You lied to me," Daniel said, his voice shaking. "You told me the refinancing was just a formality. You told me the money from the second mortgage was going into a savings account for retirement. You spent it all? On what? Clothes? Trips?" "On your image," Cynthia screamed at him. "On your suits. On your dinners. I made you look like a success when you were a failure. Daniel, you should be thanking me." Daniel recoiled as if she had slapped him. He sank back into his chair, covering his face with his hands. He was realizing, too late, that he had sold his daughter to buy a lie, and now the receipt had come due. Then, Brooke stood up. She wasn't crying anymore. Her face was twisted into a snarl of pure modern entitlement. She grabbed her phone from the table and held it up like a weapon. "This is insane," Brooke hissed. "You are all insane. You think you can just cut me off? You think you can take my house? Do you know who I am?" She pointed the phone camera at Leonard, then at me. "I have 50,000 followers," she threatened, her thumb hovering over the record button. "I will go live right now. I will tell everyone that the great Leonard Reeves is an abuser who is throwing his own family onto the street in the middle of winter. I will tell them Michelle is a psycho who framed us. I will ruin your reputation. I will cancel you. I will destroy this company," she screamed, her voice reaching a pitch that hurt my ears. "People will boycott Reeves markets. I will make sure the whole world knows what kind of monsters you are." My father looked terrified. "Brooke, put the phone down." "No," she yelled. "If I am going down, I am taking you all with me. I want my trust fund back. I want my allowance, or I press record." Leonard didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He reached for his water glass and took a slow, deliberate sip. He set the glass down. "Go ahead," Leonard said. Brooke froze. "What?" "Do it," Leonard said, gesturing to the phone. "Press the button. Tell your story." He leaned back in his chair, looking at her with an expression of utter boredom. "But before you do," he added, "you should know that I have a team of lawyers standing by. Aisha Coleman from the Justice Center has already prepared a file. It contains the forged loan documents with your signature. It contains the wire transfer records showing you spent stolen money on vacations. It contains the text messages where you and your mother discussed hiding assets." Leonard's voice hardened. "If you post that video, Brooke, you are admitting to a crime. You are providing a confession to the world, and I will not sue you for defamation. I will simply hand the recording of your live stream to the district attorney. You are 22 years old. That is old enough for federal prison." Brooke's hand shook. The phone wavered. "Prison?" she whispered. "Fraud is a felony," I said, looking her in the eye. "And since the amount is over $100,000, you are looking at 5 to 10 years. Is it worth it for the likes, Brooke?" Brooke looked at the phone. She looked at her mother, who was a sobbing mess. She looked at Leonard, who was an immovable wall. Slowly, she lowered the phone. She dropped it onto the table. It clattered loudly, sounding like a surrender. "I hate you," she whispered to me. "I hate you so much." "I know," I said. "But that does not pay the bills anymore, does it?" Leonard stood up. He adjusted his cufflinks. "Michelle," he said, "walk me to the car. I have some instructions for the transition team." "Yes, grandfather," I said. "And Cynthia," Leonard added, not looking back at her, "I suggest you start packing. Michelle will inform you of your timeline, but I would not get comfortable if I were you." I followed Leonard to the front door. The wind was still blowing outside, but now it felt cleansing. The cold air rushed in, sweeping away the stale scent of perfume and deception. At the door, Leonard turned to me. He reached out and placed a hand on my shoulder. His grip was warm and solid. "I am sorry," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I am so sorry I left you here alone. I thought I was teaching you strength. I did not know I was leaving you in a war zone." "It is okay," I said, and for the first time in years, I meant it. I survived, and I learned a lot. "You did more than survive," he said, looking at the control binder I was still clutching against my chest. "You fought back. You are a true Reeves, Michelle, more than anyone else in that room." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of keys. They were not car keys. They were heavy, brass keys on a leather ring. "These are the master keys to the Reeves Foundation office in downtown Cleveland," he said, "and the keys to the penthouse apartment in the building. It is fully furnished. It is empty. It is yours." I looked at the keys. They blurred through my tears. "I do not want to live here," I said, tilting my head back toward the mansion. "I know," Leonard said. "Sell it, burn it, turn it into a shelter. It is your decision. You are the trustee." He stepped out onto the porch. The driver opened the door of the black SUV. "Get some rest, Michelle," Leonard said. "Tomorrow, the real work begins. We have a lot of cleaning up to do." "I am good at cleaning," I said, a small smile touching my lips. "Yes," Leonard said, smiling back. "But from now on, you only clean what you own." He got into the car. I watched the SUV drive away, down the long driveway, past the manicured hedges that Cynthia loved more than her own stepdaughter. I turned back to the house. The front door was open. Inside, I could hear the muffled sounds of arguing. Cynthia was screaming at Daniel. Brooke was crying. I walked inside. I did not go to the kitchen. I did not pick up the bucket. I walked to the dining room. They stopped talking when I entered. "You have 24 hours, I said. "What?" Cynthia gasped. 24 hours, I repeated. "To pack your personal effects, clothes, toiletries, and nothing else. No furniture, no artwork, no silver. Those are assets of the trust. If you take so much as a spoon, I will call the police and have you arrested for theft." "Michelle, please," Daniel pleaded. "Where will we go?" "I don't know," I said. "But you are resourceful. Dad, you have a standard of living to maintain, right?" I turned and walked toward the stairs. "Where are you going?" Brooke asked, her voice trembling. "I am going to my room," I said, "to pack." "You mean the attic?" Cynthia spat, trying to muster one last insult. I stopped on the first step. I looked down at them, the three people who had defined my world for a decade. They looked so small from up here. "No," I said. "I am going to the master suite. I need to inspect the condition of the room before I evict the tenants." I walked up the stairs, my head held high, and for the first time in 10 years, I did not kneel. The next morning, the sun rose over the mansion in a way I had never seen before. It was not the oppressive, glaring light that usually signaled another day of servitude. It was a cold, crisp, illuminating light that exposed every dust mote and every lie. I stood in the center of the master bedroom, a room I had been forbidden from entering for years unless I was vacuuming it. My suitcase was packed. It was the same battered suitcase I had arrived with when I lost my job, but now it contained only the things that mattered: my mother's photo, my degree, and the black binder labeled Control. I picked up the binder, for months. Picking it up had made my hands tremble with a mixture of adrenaline and terror. I used to hide it under my mattress like contraband. Now, holding it felt like holding a shield. My hands were steady. My pulse was slow. The weight of the paper was no longer a burden. It was the physical manifestation of my freedom. I walked downstairs. The house was unnaturally quiet. The frantic packing I had heard through the night had ceased. In the foyer, the scene of my humiliation just 24 hours ago, Cynthia and Brooke were waiting. They looked like ghosts of their former selves. Cynthia was not wearing makeup. Her face was puffy, her eyes red-rimmed. Brooke sat on the bottom step, hugging her knees, looking like a child who had been told Santa Claus was dead. When they saw me, Cynthia stood up. She tried to smooth her hair, a reflex of vanity that seemed pathetic now. "Michelle," she began, her voice cracking, We need to talk before you go." I stopped. I did not put the binder down. "I think we have said everything." Cynthia. "No," she said, stepping forward, her hands clasped in a pleading gesture. "We haven't. Look, yesterday was intense. Emotions were high, but we are family. You cannot just erase 15 years. We made mistakes. I admit that. I was stressed. I was scared of losing everything. But we can start over. We can wipe the slate clean." "Wipe the slate clean," I repeated, like scrubbing a stain out of a rug. She flinched at the reference. "I mean, we can move forward. You have the control now. You are the trustee. Fine. We accept that. But do not kick us out. Let us stay. Let us prove to you that we can be better. We can be a real family. Brooke misses her sister." I looked at Brooke. She didn't look up. She was staring at her phone, which was dark. No live stream, no audience, just a black mirror reflecting her own misery. "Cynthia," I said softly, "you do not want a sister for your daughter. You want a financier. You want to stay in this house because you cannot imagine living anywhere else. You want to start over because the alternative is facing the reality of what you are." I walked closer to her, invading her personal space for the first time. "So here is the boundary," I said, my voice echoing in the large hall. "There is no starting over. There is only moving out. You have until 5 o'clock today to vacate the premises. The locks will be changed at 5:01. "Michelle," she gasped. "Furthermore," I continued, "if you ever attempt to contact me to ask for a loan, to ask me to co-sign a document, or to sign a character reference, I will file the criminal charges that are currently sitting on Aisha Coleman's desk. If I see one post online, one vague tweet, one TikTok video from Brooke implying that I mistreated you, I will release the audio recordings of you admitting to the fraud. Do we understand each other?" Cynthia stared at me. The hope died in her eyes, replaced by a cold, hard resentment. She realized finally that the girl she had beaten down was gone. "You are heartless," she whispered. "No," I said. "I am just solvent." At that moment, the library door opened. Daniel walked out. My father. He was holding a white envelope. He looked 10 years older than he had yesterday. His shoulders were slumped, his gait shuffling. He didn't look at Cynthia. He walked straight to me. "Michelle," he said. His voice was a rasp. "Dad," I acknowledged him. He held out the envelope. "Please give this to your grandfather. I cannot face him. Not yet." "What is it?" I asked. "It is my resignation," he said, staring at the floor. "From the board of the Reeves Group, and from the family trust, I am relinquishing my rights. I cannot be part of it anymore. Not after what I let happen." I took the envelope. It felt light, but it carried the weight of a lifetime of failure. It was an admission of guilt. It was the first honorable thing he had done in a decade. "I will give it to him," I said. "I am sorry, Michelle," he whispered, tears filling his eyes. "I was weak. I should have protected you. I was so afraid of her. I forgot to be a father." "You did," I said. "I didn't offer forgiveness. Forgiveness was something he had to earn, and he hadn't earned it yet. Good luck, Dad." I turned away from them. I walked out the front door, the heavy oak slab swinging shut behind me with a final, decisive click. Grandfather Leonard was waiting in the driveway. He was standing next to the black SUV, leaning on his cane, watching me. When he saw me emerge, he smiled. It was a genuine smile, full of warmth and pride. "Is it done?" he asked. "It is done," I said. "They are leaving." "Good," Leonard said. "And you?" "I am leaving too," I said. "I never want to spend another night under that roof." "Get in," he said. opening the car door for me himself. "Let's go home." We drove away from the mansion. I didn't look back in the rearview mirror. I watched the road ahead. We drove into the city, toward the skyline that I used to look at from a distance. The apartment Leonard had given me was beautiful. It was a penthouse in a historic building downtown, filled with light and books. But I didn't spend my days lounging in luxury. I couldn't. The fire that had been lit inside me during those long months of scrubbing floors was still burning. A week later, I walked into the offices of the Reeves Community Foundation. I wasn't there to ask for a donation. I was there to work. "I want to start a new initiative." I told the director, "I want to create a legal and financial aid unit specifically for victims of familial financial abuse. I want to help the people who are trapped in their own homes, signing papers they do not understand because they trust the people handing them the pen." They gave me a desk, they gave me a budget, and I went to work. My first hire was Aisha Coleman. We poached her from the Justice Center, doubling her salary and giving her the resources she deserved. Together, we started building cases. We helped elderly widows whose children were draining their pensions. We helped young adults whose parents had ruined their credit scores before they were 18. Every time I looked at a new file, every time I saw a forged signature or a coerced power of attorney, I saw myself. And every time we won a case, every time we handed someone their financial freedom back, I felt a little piece of my own soul healing. 6 weeks later, on a Tuesday afternoon, I received a call from the contractor I had hired. "Ms. McGee," he said, "the paint is dry. The floors are refinished. We are done." I left work early. I drove to the address that had been the center of the storm, 412 Elm Street, my grandmother's townhouse. It looked magnificent. The brick had been pointed. The shutters were painted a deep, glossy black. The windows sparkled in the afternoon sun. It no longer looked like a distressed asset. It looked like a home. I parked my car and walked up the steps. I put the key in the lock, my key, to my house. As I opened the door, a car pulled up to the curb, a modest, used sedan. I turned around. It was Daniel and Cynthia. They got out slowly. They looked different. Cynthia was wearing a simple coat, not cashmere. Her hair was pulled back, unstyled. Daniel looked tired, wearing a jacket that had seen better days. They looked smaller. They looked like ordinary people struggling to get by. They walked up the sidewalk, stopping at the bottom of the steps. They didn't dare come up to the porch. "Michelle," Daniel said, We heard you were moving in today." "I am," I said, standing on the threshold. "It looks beautiful," Cynthia said. Her voice was quiet, lacking its old bite. "You did a good job with the renovation." "The trust paid for it," I said, using the money recovered from the sale of the mansion. She flinched. The mansion had been sold 2 weeks ago to pay off the debts they had incurred. They were living in a small 2-bedroom apartment now, living off the allowance the court trustee gave Daniel. "We just wanted to say," Daniel started, then trailed off. He looked at Cynthia. "We wanted to congratulate you," Cynthia said, the words clearly tasting like ash in her mouth. "And we were hoping maybe we could come in, just for a minute, to see the place. It has been so long since we were here." I looked at them. I looked at the parents who had failed me. I saw the hesitation in their eyes, the desperate need for connection now that I held the power. They wanted to come in. They wanted to sit on my furniture, drink my coffee, and pretend that everything was normal. They wanted to inch their way back into the warmth. I thought about the girl on her knees. I thought about the smell of bleach in the cold water. I thought about the letters marked, "Return to sender." "No," I said. Cynthia's face fell. "Just for a minute, Michelle, please." "This house is a sanctuary," I said. "It is a place for truth, and you two haven't learned how to tell the truth yet." "We are trying," Daniel said. "Try harder," I said. From a distance, I looked at my hands. They were clean, manicured, strong. "There is a saying," I told them, my voice carrying clearly in the crisp autumn air. "He who seeks equity must do equity, but in my house, The rule is simpler. Whoever comes to knock on this door must have clean hands, and yours are still dirty. I saw the realization hit them. They weren't getting back in. Not today. Maybe not ever. Daniel nodded slowly, accepting the judgment. He took Cynthia's arm. Come on, Cyn, let's go. They turned and walked back to their used car. I watched them go. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt a profound sense of closure. The cord had been cut. I stepped inside the townhouse. The smell of fresh paint and lemon oil greeted me. But this was the lemon oil of preservation, not the chemical cleaner of servitude. The sun was setting through the large bay windows, casting long rectangles of golden light across the refinished hardwood floors. I walked to the center of the living room. It was empty, waiting for me to fill it with my own life, my own choices. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the air of a home that was fully, legally, and emotionally mine. I was Michelle McGee. I was the granddaughter of Leonard Reeves. I was a fighter, and I was finally, truly free. I walked to the window and watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of violet and fire. It was the end of the day, but for me, it was just the beginning. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a long journey from the attic to the townhouse, and I'm so glad I could share it with you. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from your kitchen, your car, or maybe while you are at work? Please leave a comment below and let me know your location and what you thought of how I handled Cynthia and Brooke. If you enjoyed this story of justice served, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and smash that hype button so more people can hear about how to stand up for themselves. See you in the next story.